How long is this actually going to take in this historic first criminal trial of a former president?
So this is a historic trial. There's no question about it. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's going to take a while to choose a jury here. One of the decisions that the judge made about the jury selection process is that he said he's going to excuse jurors who self-identify as being unable to serve in this case, either because they have a hard scheduling commitment that can't be changed, or because they think that they cannot be fair and impartial jurors here. And he said that if they so self-identify, he's going to excuse them without further questioning. And so we saw the consequences of that decision today. I think about 50 jurors so self-identified out of the about 98 who were initially brought into the courtroom to begin this process. And so, you had many fewer left to even begin the individual questioning. And so if that continues at that pace, the court is going to lose a lot of potential jurors simply because they self-identify as being unable to serve in this case. Now, there are good reasons why the judge made that decision. He thought it would be more efficient, and it was the same method that he used in the Trump Organization criminal trial a little while back, where he said that he found people who so self-identified. Upon further questioning, it turned out that they were excused for cause. And so he said, let's just dispense with that individual questioning with this group this time around in the interest of efficiency. But it does mean they're going to have to go through many more potential jurors in order to find 12 jurors who can serve and 6 alternates who will then go through that additional screening process and be deemed ultimately qualified jurors to serve in this extraordinary case.
Well, I guess I'm trying to figure out if this saves time. Is that a more efficient process, or does it add time because they need more people?
It's hard to say at the end of the day. It's probably more efficient at the end of the day because he's not going to have to do individual questioning of all of those people who so self-identify. There also was the logistical challenge of where would they do that questioning when you had a lot of jurors still waiting to go through this process, given that not only do you have the parties here and their lawyers, but you have Secret Service agents who are there to protect the former president. And so that was one of the logistical difficulties that drove the court to make this decision, that there was simply no space in which it was feasible to accommodate all of those who needed to be present for the individual questioning of those jurors. So probably at the end of the day, it was a smart decision, but it does mean we're probably going to churn through more jurors, more potential jurors, more quickly. Okay. I think about 3 people were left as potential jurors at the end of the day that started with 98.
Unbelievable. So this is a bit of a grind. There were a few rulings before he ever even got to jury selection or the start of it. The judge refused to recuse himself. That's one. Also ruled that Karen McDougal will be allowed to testify in that trial. How significant is that?
So I think the evidentiary rulings that the judge has made thus far, including today, are fair and sound. For example, Karen McDougal is going to be permitted to testify about her alleged affair with the former president and the payment that she received not to sell her story. And that makes sense because it's all part of the larger narrative here about the so-called catch and kill scheme that the National Enquirer was allegedly part of with Trump to essentially silence stories that were negative for Trump as he went into his presidential campaign. And so I think it's appropriate that the jury hear about that larger narrative. But at the same time, the judge also ruled that really significant evidence will not be admitted against the former president. And so, for example, with respect to the Access Hollywood tape that was released just a couple weeks before the presidential election in 2016, in which Trump can be heard essentially bragging about sexually assaulting women and getting away with it because he's famous, the judge ruled that the jury can hear testimony about that tape because it sets up the narrative that the payment was made to Stormy Daniels immediately after in order to essentially shore up his campaign prospects in the wake of that Access Hollywood tape. But the jury will not see the videotape because the judge said that would be too prejudicial. And so I think the judge is striking a fair balance, letting the jury hear the larger story that the state is trying to tell, while making sure that the defendant here, former President Trump, will not be unfairly prejudiced by information and evidence that would sway the jury in ways that would be unfair.